Artificial intelligence has been around for a while, and even though ChatGPT is the fastest growing product of all time, only 50% of people know about it, and only 25% have even heard of Midjourney. Now, these tools use massive amounts of data, and I've got just the expert to talk about it today. So, today I am talking to Walter Shields. He is a renowned data expert with 25 years of experience managing data systems for startups and Fortune 500 companies. He's the author of the SQL Quick Start Guide, as well as several courses on LinkedIn, including SQL Essential Training with more than 75,000 learners. So, Walter, you have a computer science degree. You studied applied data science at MIT, and you also started your own data science business. Can you talk a little bit about your journey and your secret to being successful in so many things?
Oh, wow. Well, number one, first and foremost, thank you so much, Ray, for having me here and
Mhm.
that amazing introduction. I need a transcript for that. Um,
That's great.
but to this point, and as you kind of introduced, I feel like I'm very lucky to be in the position that I'm in right now.
Hmm.
I think it's a journey in the making,
Hmm.
and sort of that journey is original. I guess let me start from the beginning. Originally, I'm from a little island called Trinidad. All the
Oh
Trinis in
yeah.
the house.
Wow.
What's up? Um, and I always had a passion for tinkering with stuff. So I remember taking my dad's radio apart and just fascinated with what are the different parts of it.
Hmm.
That sort of transition into getting into wanting to get into engineering. Actually, they didn't have that available in Trinidad where I started. Um, and then it was actually available. Someone said, "Hey, you know what? Try computer science." So here I am trying computer science, and lo and behold, as far as specifically in data, and I know computer science is huge, in data specifically, I just kind of fell into it, right? Mainly with the tool of Microsoft Access. So I know back then a lot of folks excelled at web development in like C programming, C++, C#, that type of stuff. Date myself, but I just kind of had an affinity for working with data sets for
Hmm.
some reason, and Access with that was that tool. Um, so long story short, I always just gravitated to the data component of things.
Hmm.
After I studied in school, I didn't really study data, but I just remember like data subjects using Access and just kind of like, yo, this is kind of cool, right? Um, Fast forward, I graduated from New Jersey City University in with computer science, very general again. Went to my first job in New York City Transit Authority, and just again started working with the databases. So in that time,
Hmm.
it was working with the payroll and payroll data, which was very sensitive data, 40,000 workers. So I got a gradual sense of sensitivity, scale. I just slowly started to work with data and see what the things I could do with it. So um, I guess I started, I guess, regular, like started getting on a career like anyone else. But as far as the teaching component, I just felt after a while in my career, sort of lost a bit. Had some life moments, had the
Hmm.
loss of my mom, things like that,
Hmm.
that kind of shook me up and had me asking the question, well, hey, what's the purpose of this stuff, right? What do
Hmm.
you want to be the real, what do you want to feel? Do you feel good about this, right? And what does make you feel good about it? And that sort of search led me to uh, having a real passion for teaching folks this stuff and recognizing that, wait, along the way in all these jobs, I was actually teaching people without even knowing it. So I formally started to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to try this formally. And I opened a Meetup group. I don't know if you know that site, meetup.com.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And and
That's like I think that's
started
like
a
one of the secrets of I don't know developers that developers have like the ability to connect and meet with other people is like a huge advantage. So many great things
huge,
happen from like either
huge.
meetups or like local events that you can look up. So even if I don't know if you're somebody like me who is traditionally been an introvert like all my life, when I realized the value of those connections that you get from going to those things, I determined that I need to make myself. It's not like something that I'm comfortable with, but I need to make myself go to them because there's so much value in them. So that was that
I
was part of your
mean,
journey.
I wanna echo what you said so much. I mean, because like you said, like me,
Hmm.
I don't know if I am an introvert as well myself. I'd rather be in the corner, kind of like
Hmm.
just maybe they say secretly that's what all coders and stuff kind of
Yeah.
want to do. Just leave me alone. I'll be in the corner just doing. I'll give you the code. But those meetups, I gotta tell you, like they open my eyes, and it's a critical component to kind of really get out in that space and meet others like minds.
Hmm.
And really, I learned a tremendous amount. So anyway, so
Super
yes,
cool. So I do want to acknowledge we have a
so
bunch of people dropping in from the show, and we have
awesome,
Ayua from South Sudan, Ayolua from
awesome.
Nigeria,
What's
somebody from
up?
North
What's up?
Carolina,
North
Mississippi, no,
Carolina.
Missauga, I'm sorry, Ontario, so and Tunisia. So we're all, even though you and I are like both in Florida, it seems like the show is like small, but look at it. We've got people from Kenya,
Love that. Love
Brazil,
that. Love that.
Cleveland, Ohio. So super cool to hear everybody. I appreciate you all dropping in
Yeah.
where you're calling
Big.
from.
Absolutely. I echo that.
So
Big shout out to everyone.
yeah, everybody's showing up today. So yeah, so then you were really big into data. Leverage sort of the meetups to like get you connected to places. What happened after that, Walter?
So I opened this meetup with the intention of saying, hey, let me try to teach people about databases, about data analytics, about
Mm-hmm.
SQL. So I opened a meetup and I just had an announcement. If you remember meetups, you could just create an event. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I'll be in the Gotan coffee shop. So, that Gotan is a coffee shop in Tribeca, New York. And just said, hey, I'll be the guy with the red left laptop. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to learn about databases, just tap me on the shoulder. I'll be happy to teach you about it. And before I knew it, the whole coffee shop was full of people. I was
What?
like,
That's
what is
great.
going on here?
Yeah, people are
I was
hungry for it already.
like,
That's
yeah.
great.
So that really gave me my first spur. And, I started to work with like Capital One Bank, who offered their spaces for folks like myself who had educational material to teach folks. And that
Mm,
evolved into the book that I had written now about 4 years ago. Was approached by the publisher and they were like, hey, I see you're doing your stuff. Like, we need
mm-hmm.
someone to talk about this stuff. And so eventually that's how it kind of like the book kind of, it's not like, oh, this was like a master plan. Like, it just one
Yeah,
thing
that's right.
sort of led to another.
Yeah.
So the book led to myself kind of, really putting out my feelers for that medium of teaching folks how to do something. And that really gave me the feedback so
Mm-hmm.
that I was onto something. So my,
Mm-hmm.
my thing that I am really a proponent of is like this stuff can easily seem complicated, but there is a way to simplify it. And there's an absolute way to have fun while learning about this stuff and decomplifying it, if that's a word.
Mm-hmm.
But
No, definitely.
so that
That,
was
no,
sort
that's
of my
great.
journey. Yeah, and then of course LinkedIn Learning, just creating some really awesome partnerships there and courses and having fun along the way. And here I am today talking to you.
Yeah, I feel like you are still, I feel like it's still the beginning of your journey. Like, who knows? I mean, even though 75,000 learners, that's a lot, but I think you're just getting started as well. And, as this world is sort of trying to shift towards AI, I feel like there's even more opportunities. It's like a really weird thing is that right now there's not that many sort of experts in AI. So this is a great time to learn something new, and if you can be one of the first people that learn it and learn how to teach it, I know that another secret that teachers know is that the best way to learn something is to have to explain it to somebody else. It doesn't have to be a book, it doesn't have to be like a video. But if you show up to a meetup and just say, hey, listen, this week I'm going to try to teach X, Y, and Z, you'll learn it so much better because it forces you to think about it and remember what it was like not to know it, and that puts you in a different sort of frame of mind, I think. So,
I think you're absolutely right. Right. I mean, I think the backdrop of this, it
hmm
just happens to be AI presently, right?
hmm
Yesterday was the internet. Before that, it was like, I don't know, electronics, the
hmm
car. The backdrop of this is, and which is why I feel so passionate about it, is the learning teaching component, right? Having,
hmm
and that goes beyond just the physical act or action of learning and teaching.
hmm
It is that person, that individual who has that, I guess, hunger or desire to improve themselves, right?
hmm
And in knowing what's happening in the evolving world that we live in, right? Um,
So true.
so, I just, so that's, yeah, my two
Yeah,
cents.
you were talking about how this is so funny because as I'm interviewing so many different people, in the show, I end up talking to a lot of people that have, I don't know, similar themes, it seems. And a few weeks ago, I talked to Sadie St. Lawrence. So she started Women in Data in a very similar fashion. She said she thought that, she wanted to connect. She felt like she was the only woman in data, in her job. And so she wanted to do a startup. And it's the same thing you did. She went onto, I think, Meetup, created an event, and she was like the only one she didn't get the full room treatment the first time she did it. Maybe it was a niche kind of I don't know, event, but she said that she was really like sad because she showed up and there's nobody there, and people were just like a little bit late. So I think she said she texted her boyfriend and she's like, he was like, stay there just like 10 more minutes and see if somebody shows up. And sure enough, people just came in a little bit later. And now, that is a multinational,
Wow.
group that helps, thousands of people all over the place. It's a fantastic organization. And again, like having like that courage to do that one thing will always turn into other things. Like everything that I have gotten has been as a result of like something that happened before, or because of some connection that I didn't think was going to be a connection.
Yeah.
That I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know about how you ended up. You mentioned that your book came from those trainings. That when I wrote my book, it was from somebody that I had talked to like 6 years earlier that I never thought
Wow.
I'd see again, and they ended up working at a book publisher and connecting with me and saying, hey, we're looking for people. And since she had some experience with me, but it's that you make a connection,
Right.
you act professionally, and things happen as a result of
I
that, right?
I want to echo that because we talked about the meetup group.
Mm-hmm,
But that meetup group really became something, right?
mm-hmm,
That we grew to like something like, it's probably like it's not huge numbers again, but to me it was like about 2,000 or so followers.
wow, wow,
Um, but it became something because that was a wealth of value where I learned a whole lot just from
mm-hmm,
meeting so many different people and just like understanding like so many different needs, understanding the impact that I was having, right?
mm-hmm,
And then so to your point, like I think having that, whatever it is that you do, having that connection, that knowing that that is your passion, you will, through high or the low, whether it's one person in the room, nobody in the room, 50,000 people in the room, you will have something to say, right?
mm.
And I think that there'll always be a listening ear once it's connected to a passionate place that you're coming from, right?
Yeah, we're getting
So
some great wisdom in the chat. So Stanley says, well, it's 60% who you know is 40% that feels through. And Anthony's
uh,
saying helping others is the best way of expanding yourself. Yeah, for
absolutely,
sure. Uh,
absolutely,
and I think too that that's also, I think like really good teachers are more discovered than anything else. You end up realizing that you enjoy that aspect, like how to do this stuff. But
right.
occasionally I'll go to a conference, where the people may be paid to be there, and maybe I'm listening to a topic from the guy who invented something, and I can tell that that person hasn't thought of what it was like when they didn't know this stuff. And so even though I know what they're talking about, it's really like
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time following it, and it's because
You know,
it's almost like a different skill to be a teacher, that you have to like learn, oh, okay, how to explain it properly, or that didn't make any sense. So
yeah, I know
yeah, you kind of,
exactly. Like
yeah.
I know exactly. Because like it's like that funny joke where people talk about with you know, the help desk tech, right?
Hmm.
Who comes and treats you like the lowly peasant, like
Yeah.
you know not what I speak of, you know. So, you know, it's like, you know, just
Yeah.
this is talk way over your head, and there was a sort of passion in the more complicated things can sound, the more intelligent I guess people feel they sounded. And in the tech world, that couldn't be more true.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my thing, right? All right, okay, like now I wanted to really destroy that. You know,
Yeah.
I really wanted to, like, you know, dismantle that. Let me put that as a nicer word. I wanted to
Yeah.
dismantle that, and just like remove the fact that approaching any topic really is a matter of breaking it down to smaller parts,
Hmm.
and then having different perspectives, different points of views, right? Different ways of describing that thing. All right. So, and understanding that that's exactly what's happening. There are multiple
Hmm.
points of views, meaning students, learners, that are trying to grasp this concept, and there's different ways of approaching it. That's why I love SQL. So, you know, you could approach a problem from multiple points of view, right? Your brain capacity for solving, your critical thinking skills, your
Hmm.
approach is can be very different from mine, and we could end up at the same destination very effectively as well too, right? So, and
Hmm.
I like catering to that difference, right? So that's kind of
Yeah,
a
it's
big
it's
driver of
it's
mine.
not. It feels like, I mean, I have some experience with SQL, and it feels like very easy to learn. It was written to be English like, and but there's a level of creativity to it, right? Because you can do things in different ways, and there's a lot of amazing things in the language itself that although it's easy to learn, it can be really powerful. So let's talk a little bit about
Absolutely.
how AI is kind of like coming to change things, because it's data has been a part of computer science for quite a bit, but it looks like AI is coming in and sort of readjusting how things are. And I'm curious, you've lived in data and as a data analyst through for a long time. So what do you think that AI is going to be doing in your world?
Good question. So the good thing with AI, you know, so old schoolers like myself, let me put it
Hmm.
that way. You know, you you came into learning about data analytics from a particular angle, and I'll expand on that in a bit. Um, but now AI has been proven to be just an augment of it. So if you
Hmm.
started off in data analytics, learning SQL, you have already started the AI journey because it is part of
Hmm.
the process, right? So, so more specifically, what I'm referring to is kind of like that evolution, right? So that evolution
Hmm.
is traditional data analytics is, you know, computer science, where it's more like traditional generating of reports. So you have, let's say, data that's stored in a database, and you use SQL and you generate a report to see something about
Hmm.
it. Then along came data, right? So we started to use more and more data, and then the advent of big data. So this
Hmm.
gave rise to now you have to learn new techniques of data analysis and
Hmm.
handling larger, more vaster amounts of data. Mm. And that sort of gave rise to data science. So now you have enough data to apply statistical methods against it, right? So that's
Hmm.
the advent of data science, and where you could now start now not so data science allowed us to now stop looking backward and start looking forward, right? So by applying time tested and old statistical methods that's embedded in topics like machine learning. That's where you can now build models and apply
Hmm.
data science. So that's sort of the evolution to
Hmm.
me of how we got to the point of integrating data science from
Hmm.
tradition. And as far as going forward, I think there's going to be uh, all types of uh, all types of new opportunities, particularly. And I'll say one thing uh, I'll say one thing: those who hold domain expertise in anything, right? If you have been working in some area and you are considered a domain expertise expert because you've been just in that area for that long, you have a
Mm-hmm.
real up in terms of being able to augment that because there's nuance in industry, right? In terms of data science, it's not a general thing. So now you have to tailor it to your specific industry. So if you hold domain expertise in that industry and you learn and you augment, you add on the skill of data science, well, you're just very powerful, right?
Mm. It's really
So that's
interesting because
kind
I
of
know
picture.
you mentioned that you started with I think it was you mentioned access. So back in the old days, we had basically all the data used to just live in your hard drive. I mean, you would have to, maybe on a network eventually, but it was just data that was on your hard drive, and you would access it. Then it went to the local network, and then it went to the cloud, right? And you saw this kind of progression. And it got, like you mentioned, you went to big data. So now instead of you dealing with a limited amount of data, you just have this massive amount of information. And then we got data science. And I think that people feel like maybe AI is going to take away jobs, but I like what you said about domain knowledge is really now the important thing, because the AIs don't really understand, what questions to ask. Like, the questions have to be asked by the individuals. And so that's where data science, and the domain knowledge is going to be, I think, more important, because where we went from little hard drive, big data, cloud, and then, now that amount of information is going to be even more massive. We're talking like billions, 175 billion parameters. Like, that is just
Yeah,
insane. Like, that's not just
insane.
big data, that's like huge like huge
Yeah,
amounts of data. And
it's
so
it's
we're just, yeah, we're at a different
it's
level.
yeah, it's insane. It's like degrees of data, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Dimensions of data, and so the more, and that's the thing that folks should realize, right? Like, what's causing this? It's the data. It's the amount of data. So what's going to
Yeah.
keep it evolving? The
Mm-hmm.
ever, the accumulation of data, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
constantly accumulating. So you're going to have to start evolving in your methods, just like how we moved from traditional querying of data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Structure, querying structured data, and now having to change our methods because now we have to consider volume, right, in terms of that big data component. So now we have to think about how efficient we can write a query that ran on 24 records the same that was going to run on 24 billion records, right? So that's the adjustment that had to be made between traditional, and that's the same sort of shift that's going to have to be made between, where we are now and data science. So
That's interesting. Yeah. And so another thing that people might be worried about is that, 43% of companies in one of the articles that I saw said that they're going to plan to use AI in interviews by next year. That is super interesting. I wonder how that's going to work. So, how do you think that these will be different? And is there anything that people should do now to be prepared? Are we all going to be just talking to some machine in the future?
yeah, I think this is a classic example of how to expect the integration of AI technology, right? I mean, I
Mm,
remember this is years ago. I actually did have one of these, I think, video interviews, but now it's
mm,
really all like really AI is being woven into things. So, why AI? Why do we, So there's a number of different benefits to AI in terms of the ability to now analyze much more massive amounts of data. So, but what's the backdrop of that action? It's
mm-hmm,
efficiency, right? It's time savings, right? The ability to kind of reclaim some time, right? So that's when you think about that in the interview process, there's a massive amount of time that goes in. I remember being sitting in on many interviews, and you have to, usually you're an employee that's conducting the interview, right? So you
mm-hmm.
have to go through a repetitive task on candidates that may or may not be a perfect match. So it may or may not be a total waste of your time, right? And you may have to have one of those experiences where now you're kind of like have that human component. Oh my gosh, is this going to be a waste of my time? So now you're kind of shortchanging somebody's experience in terms of who's walked into that interview room. So those are some of the human components and the factors that you have to consider that like this technology would help, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now you kind of remove things. Some of the benefits of this, right, is kind of removing that sort of bias, right? Now you're going to
Mm-hmm.
remove bias, and not to mention other degrees of bias that happen, especially in IT, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this has the potential to uh, create that sort of aid in this space,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not going to take over anything, right? It's going to
Mm-hmm.
weed out, right? Speed up that first process, but that last hop of is this person the right fit for the company? I think any and every company would say that needs to be a face-to-face conversation. I can't have an AI making that decision, right? So I think it's just a matter of marrying the technology to the existing process to gain some efficiency with regard to time savings, but then you get that human component still that makes that final decision.
Yeah, so last week I was talking to Nick Singh. He has a book where he talks about how he broke into like the fan companies. He worked in Google and Facebook, and he was talking about how that component that you're mentioning of the personal relationship is still always going to be important, but at the beginning of your application, like in your if you're sort of starting by applying from a website or something like LinkedIn, usually you're trying to sort of tailor your approach to a recruiter. So maybe in the near future, you're going to start maybe tailoring your approach to some sort of AI that's going to verify that you meet certain criteria. But I think, even though maybe, yeah, I think there's a clear benefits to that. But I think that some of that, the end goal is still going to be the same of, having personal relationships with people and being able to do that. So I found this other article where you mentioned the introduction that I mentioned in the introduction about how only 43% of people, uh, 43% of people have no idea what ChatGPT is. And it's always surprising to me when I find one of those people because I'm living on it every day. All our teams are talking about all our companies kind of every meeting is like, what are we doing with AI? What's happening with AI? How do we have enough coverage? And I feel like every company is talking about it, but maybe not.
Right,
I think the article said that only 1 in 3 people have even tried some of these tools. Does this
right,
surprise you? And what do you see out there, like in the world of data, where people are used to just dealing with SQL? Like, are they going, no, no, that's not going to be a thing?
yeah,
What's happening in your world?
yeah, yeah. I think this is such an important component because it's like you said, like in my world, there's this you cannot get lost in your world, right? So there is
Hmm.
another perception, as and I kind of try to balance that myself, so when I say
Hmm.
that, like, so for myself, I'm really passionate about all things AI and really like see a lot of the good that could be applied to things, um, but that's my world, right?
Hmm.
There's a world that really doesn't feel like that. There's a world that feels threatened by AI,
Hmm.
right? So there is, for me, when you say that statistic, I I want to acknowledge it and also approach it in a way that how do we apply education so that I see so I always try to say, how can I provide some value? And in terms of what we're speaking about here, education, I think that's a major component. I think there's a misconception about it. There is a real thing about like this whole, there was another article I posted about, so there's a real thing of fear about this Terminator-like reality about AI, where eventually the machines are going to become so advanced that they'll realize that there's no need for human beings, and just very doomsday like story. Um, and it's a real thing because it's actually, it actually reached some parts of the political, just in political conversations. So you cannot ignore it. I think what that spells is an opportunity to educate.
Hmm.
Think about the internet again. I always kind of Like let's think about the internet. I mean, I think there's a big portion of us that use the internet in a particular way, right? If at all. Think about older folks; they may just use it to check their email or just check the first story on Google, for instance, or
Mhm.
something in a very minimal way, right? Um, as opposed to somebody who really embraces the technology, really understands, wait a minute, I could start up a store, I could actually create an income from this, I can actually do some really impactful advertising, a total different way of using it. So it's all about in the knowledge, right? It's all about in breaking down that fear of that misconception and misunderstanding. So that's what I think that statistic spells, an opportunity
Mm.
for that.
Yeah, think about, the world where I came from. I came from the news industry. And the news industry was definitely like super concerned about what was going to happen. And it did have this huge effect. But, after the news industry, I went to work for radio. Radio had some definite issues, and it's smaller than it used to be. I think news is smaller, but in a way, it's also bigger because now
Right,
everybody can be like a writer and an editor and have their own website, their podcast, their, everything that you thought was going to go away has been democratized. Like anybody can
right,
have their own TV channel now. Anybody can have their own show now. So that has, although perhaps like maybe some TV networks have less of they're smaller, focused, and have less of an impact on culture and society, there's a much huger amount of impact and a lot more opportunities than there ever were now that
right,
anybody can do that. So it's like,
right.
if you just think about it as, yeah, it's going to affect my job in a negative way. Yes, but it might create all these other opportunities. Think of all the podcasts
Right.
that we have out there. That's like a radio station, right? The podcast,
Absolutely.
the live streams that we're
Absolutely.
having. This is like a TV show that we have every week.
So what do we what are we are what happens? History repeats, right?
That's right,
So
right.
I see it. I don't see one of the things that came to mind as you were saying that point is that like you think about the the generation to come, right? Think about the folks to come, the kids to
Hmm.
come. They have a
Hmm.
whole different relationship with this technology. It's like,
That's
what
so
else
true.
is there,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Like, what are you
And they're
talking about?
used to it.
Like, what,
Yeah,
like, uh, the other day I was looking at a movie with my son, and he was like, he's 10 years old. So someone picked up the phone, like regular, like old school rotary phone. He was like, "What is that?" Like, it, it didn't have a place in his head for
yeah. But yeah,
like
that's fun.
what is that thing? Like, what is somebody's at the other end of that? So it's like
Yes. Yeah. What is that thing that they're doing with their
yeah,
fingers and they gotta like rotate? It's
exactly,
really funny. I watched this like YouTube video one time where they had these kids that couldn't use the internet like for a week. Like they made a vow that they were gonna not use it for a week, and yet they were
right,
still in school, so they still had to write a paper, and they went to the library and they had to look up a typewriter, and it was 10 minutes of them trying to find the on switch because they couldn't figure out, they couldn't figure out
there's
how to
no
turn it
there's no
on.
electricity
How do
going.
you put yeah, exactly. It was literally 10. It was so hilarious because none of them knew how to turn it on, and they had to get the librarian, and it's like, no, here, you turn it on here. Here's your paper. This is how you put it in. Here's how you
So
type,
funny.
but that, I think that if you think about the things that we thought were going to be worse, they ended up creating like a lot more opportunity. I've mentioned in plenty of other shows that, when we figured out how to ship things faster, we didn't get less
Right,
shipping. We got more shipping. We didn't get less delivery people. Look at the explosion of delivery now. It's like this huge
right,
thing.
right.
So
Yeah,
technology, I think, has a way of like changing, but then also creating opportunities that in your brain you're going, we're all going to lose our jobs. But then maybe we're going to be
that's
doing something else, and maybe that other thing is going to be a lot better. When would anybody have put Walter and Ray on TV? Maybe I don't think I know I wouldn't have gotten that chance. I worked at a TV station,
yeah,
but we could
yeah.
do that today. This is fantastic. And we got people from all over the place: Sudan, Nigeria, Brazil, Tunisia. Like
Yeah,
when were all those people going to be like in the same place talking to each other like we're doing
Yeah,
it right
yeah.
now? It's a new
Amazing,
world.
amazing,
And what's that going
amazing.
to be
Yeah,
like in 5 or 10 years? It's going to be great. We're enjoying this. Like I'm having a good time.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like you know, like what cannot be. It's as they say, it's not what the invention is. It's what it's being used for, right? Who is
hmm
actually using it and for what? Think about anything, right? You
hmm
know, the internet can be used, and it does get used for like right now, like you said, we're on the
yeah,
internet, right? I think we're doing something that's good, you know, and I like using this technology this way, but
yeah,
others may not use it this way. They may use it in a different way. So it's like, what do we do, right? I think yes, that calls for guidelines. That calls for having some sort of accountability baked into
hmm
just having being a user of the environment. But you don't suffocate the advancement of technology for that. That's just my
hmm
personal opinion.
yeah. I think in a way we're living in these two different realities, and there is the concern is that there is a potential for some people being left behind. AI tools are democratizing things. So
Mm,
I use a tool called Descript that does
mm,
like automatic removal of all of the ums and ahs and editing, and it can let me edit in a way that is much more intuitive and
mm,
interactive, that
mm,
makes editing something that I can do just with a little text editor, right? And
mm,
so I think if you didn't know that I could be a video editor, like in the future, you wouldn't have projected. You would have said, okay, all editors are going to lose their jobs. Well, yeah, but what's the real sort of, I don't know, what's the really important thing about a show? It's like the writing, the thinking, like the editing, the conversations that you have, the interaction with people. Like when, on a TV, on a radio, when I was in radio, it was, people had to call in on one of those phones, and you would get the DJ maybe, and maybe you could hear like one person,
right,
one out of like the 500 people that try to call because they were giving
right.
something away, got to say something. Now
Yeah,
we've got a conversation kind of going on in the background, and we can,
mm,
talk to them. So I just think that
yeah,
this is like, I don't know if anybody works on the internet. There was a time before the internet, and those people that got jumped on it quick were able to do things.
yeah.
So I think, I mean, do you have any thoughts about what we can do to sort of, and you mentioned meetups, but encourage that sort of exploration? Because, one of the charts that I was showing was that there is a generational gap. You mentioned your son,
Right,
but if you looked at
right,
this thing, it says, look, the millennials and Gen Z all in. Gen
right,
Xers, like me, I'm a little bit older, are a little
right.
bit behind. Boomers are not into it. So what do we do? What do we do, Walter?
Yeah. I mean, so one of the things you remind me of, and this is a good chart of it, kind of
hmm
maybe symbolically. So one of my favorite artists is Bob Marley, and one
hmm
of his lines was, "When one door is closed, many more
Ah,
are open." Right.
so good.
Um, and I feel like that is sort of like the kind of evolution of technology when you think about it. So yes, indeed, some doors are going to be closed, right?
hmm
Because of the advancements of technology. And sometimes you want to have those doors closed. I mean, would you want to
hmm
go back to the typewriter like you were just talking about there?
Yeah, that's
Like,
I gotta find
you
that. I
know,
gotta find that video and put it on the show
you
notes because it's
know,
so hilarious. It
do you
work,
want,
classic. Yeah, yeah. I
ask
mean,
people, do you absolutely want to
you
be restricted to mail, snail mail
yeah.
only,
Think about
right?
like automatic spell check and correction. Something that for somebody this is a second language, English. I feel like I can write creatively well, but
Right,
technically, I can never remember when I type in the word which, if is it like have an
right,
H on it, and there's always like these
right,
words that kind of confuse me, but that's like gone now.
right,
You
right.
type it in, it knows what you did, it knows like the sentence structure, and it kind of fixes it. Grammar in the same way. AI is
Right.
now able to critique your work. And so I
That's
think that, yeah, I mean, I
it's
think,
just it's natural evolution. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
you you're saying it. I mean, to me, it's just so. So those doors are going to be closed, but many
Mhm.
more are going to be open, right?
Yeah.
When you think about that just in the physical landscape of the internet technology, the platform
Mhm.
called the internet.
Mhm.
First, there were only brick and mortars. The
Mhm.
platform are now allowed virtual stores to be and a whole new revenue stream, right?
Mhm.
So now, so now it's not the platform; it's what's on the platform, right? So
Mhm.
now there are technologies, software applications that now allow you to be more efficient on this thing called the internet. So instead of me now painstakingly putting lines of code to build an HTML website, I can now drag and drop and easily do one or five in the time it took me
Mhm.
to do, one yesterday. Right. So,
Yeah,
it's,
it just remember life like before somebody showed you how to do undo, like undo or copy paste or duplicate,
mm,
like and I think we're gonna be just be giving all these tools. So you've got a newsletter where you send out like a lot of fantastic articles. I want to talk about another one that you talked about called exploring the next frontier in data analytics, exploring dark data. So it looks like one of the things that comes as a result of all of this flood of data. We went from like data in your hard drive to like data in the cloud and data in
yeah,
big data, and now we have like billions of parameters. But it means that there's all this information that is underutilized by companies, right? So companies are gathering like all of this data, but they're not doing anything with it. I think that's a huge opportunity, for somebody out there and for this AI and people that can take the concept of AI and focus it on something like this. So can you talk a little bit about what this is and how people can sort of maybe use this as an example?
yeah. Yeah, I think so. So thanks for highlighting this one because I found it fascinating. Sometimes it's some things that's kind of obvious that like, oh wait, yeah, but it's this is like I call it like the I guess the progression of data exploration has been from the
Mm-hmm.
obvious to the not so obvious, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we went to the obvious places like, oh, what's the sales point of sale information like, what is the customer database like, what is you just all the obvious points of data collection that you would go to. Uh, I think we tapped into that and built all
Mm-hmm.
types of reports, built all types of things around it, and now predictive analysis around that. But now we can't. So one of the major shifts that has happened is we can now start looking and asking the question, what can we do with this massive repository of data? We couldn't ask that question before. Now we
Mm-hmm.
have all of the hardware, the processing power to start asking questions about repositories that we couldn't even look at before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what's happening with dark data. Dark data is that kind of, we can't even, that's just junk data.
Mm-hmm.
Just toss it over there, right? So so this is now sort of like a new aha moment saying, well, wait a minute, all of that tossed away data, and this tossed away data are things like customer interactions,
Mm-hmm.
like website logs, I guess like things like sensor data, IoT, like Internet of Things data.
Mm-hmm.
So so basically like logs, system logs, things like that. So things that you would think that is just that's just junk, you
Mm-hmm.
can actually start applying learning algorithms uh, to this yesterday's junk data to find today's really valuable insights, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's what this whole dark data thing is about. It's like tapping into these sources that were just sort of piled upon, like logs and so forth, um, unstructured data to some extent, like
Mm-hmm.
archived data, things like that. So think about things like, let's say, if you have a WordPress website and you have a historical log of stuff that you just like just
You,
like
you
one
just
time it
can't you just
happened to me.
can't go look at that. I mean, I remember like, when I worked in the newsroom, if the news people were doing research, a lot of times it was like, I got to go look at the government records, and it would be literal files. Give me a box of like
Right.
every, everything that's been done with this particular topic. And it would be
Right.
literally 10 boxes, and you would have to go thing by thing, and look
Yeah.
for the needle in the haystack. That's I
Literally.
think I think that Hamdi asked this question on the chat. What impact will AI have on data science? I think we're talking about it. This dark data, like the ability of AI to get to another level of
Right.
processing massive, like billions of pieces of data that no human could ever do. No SQL could give you that kind of, no simple SQL query could give you that kind of impact. But as you add perhaps some of the ability of SQL to now make an analysis of just crazy amounts of data, we're like in a different world. And I think, like, you're right, this
Absolutely.
dark data, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that is a gold
Yeah.
mine of information for a
Yeah.
company. And that's exactly the type of thing that I think AI is fantastic at, being able to take a look at so many parameters and give you some new insights that you didn't even know you've had all along.
I mean, I mean, when you look at things like AI is now being used and applied to speed up for instance, things like the invention of vaccines, right?
That's right.
Just to
That's
come
right.
up with that process has been sped up by, that was like a 10-year or so process, if I was not mistaken, but it was years long process that sped up incredibly. The detection of cancer, that
Mm-hmm.
is massive amounts of data where AI is now able to find patterns where humans cannot before. The ways and means that we had to analyze these data to get these insights, we just could not. So, I mean, for me, when I think about the impact that AI can have, it is really for these human life changing scenarios where you can actually improve somebody's life, help somebody improve themselves in some way, shape, or form. Right?
Yeah, this
That's really
article
what it's
again.
about.
People get tired when I'm talking about AI. I say AI is like the Terminator. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't quit. It can keep on going
Right.
at a problem and give you, insight that you're not going to be able to get people to do. But having people be able to ask the right questions and having a data analyst that understands, the science behind the data, the value that of the data that we're not looking for, the things that we don't know that we need to find in the data. Computers can't do that, but they're really good at just being thrown at a problem, working on it for a period of time, and being able to come back with insights. So another
Yeah.
article that you wrote was about how data science is helping, I guess, social media. So this article was this data science and social media unlocking the power of user data. Talked about how one of the things that AI is really good at is sentiment analysis, like being able to understand how people are feeling and feeling about a specific product. So, and that's one of the decisions that a lot of companies, can live and die on how people feel about their product at any particular time. So, there's a lot of information that perhaps people aren't tying into like this that will, AI is going to make possible as well. So, what were your
Right.
thoughts on this article?
Yeah, I think this is huge because it goes into some of the so traditionally, at least like structured data is what was very common. And structured data
Mm-hmm.
is like think Excel spreadsheet data stored um, very statically, and you could get a lot of value and a lot of insight, and you still can, and that's why it's still used. Um, but you have unstructured data, which is like think
Mm-hmm.
social media post, where it's a sentence, right? It's just kind of like a free flowing sentence, but baked into that sentence is what why we go to social media, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
this person was really passionate about something that they posted, or that person was really angry, or that person like they didn't really care for that anymore. It sounded like they didn't really care about this thing that everyone was talking about. Whatever it might be, there's a certain sentiment in there which
Mm-hmm.
has value, right? And that is what. we now have the ability to actually measure, right? And get
Yeah.
a sense of what it is, what sort of sentiment our customers have about our brand is what, most
Yeah.
companies would be asking, right?
And
So
soon enough,
you
that'll be like in real time, or once you train AIs like on your product, on your data, then that's also going to give
Yeah,
you new insights that we haven't had. It's not, I mean,
absolutely.
you mentioned like the cancers. That's amazing. That's amazing. But I think that there's other uses that can be also powerful, especially for businesses who can, make things happen.
That's the thing with AI. I think it has reinvented all facets, all things. You
Hmm.
could reimagine. Well, what would this be like with AI, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
the question to ask of all things, right? And even with this whole sentiment stuff, it's like now it's like, okay, how do we get the nuances?
Hmm.
And like so, which is like one of the categories is like automated sentiment analysis, and that's kind of like where you kind of break down the sentiment or the let's say your post or your review of your product
Hmm.
into positive, negative, and neutral. And you have like machine learning algorithms that are like trained like on what's called like labeled data, and then you're able to now get a sentiment, right? You could either,
Hmm.
is that a positive comment or review, is that a negative, is that a neutral, and then in turn that's super powerful information to now tailor maybe a marketing campaign or some segment
Hmm.
of your customer base. So it's a lot of insights, a lot of cool insights.
Yeah, I think that marketing and promoting like things has always felt like you try something and you're not sure how you arrive at that original sort of I don't know idea. You basically you have an idea about what you should try or how you should do a campaign, and then you
Hmm.
measure afterwards, and then you realize, okay, that was a bad idea. I think that there's maybe some opportunities to actually have the social
Reverse that,
media tell
right?
us, okay, yeah, like
Yeah.
look at all the campaigns we are run. Tell me what we have done in the past that has worked, and I think we're gonna see that as well. So, after we come back from the break, I'll be talking to Donnie Ma, who actually specializes on that sort of like marketing. So that'll be really interesting to touch on this. So what's other things that you're working on today? I don't know how much you can tell me because I know you're doing an AI course for us. So
Yeah.
maybe you could generically kind of mention, the things that you're
Yeah.
interested in and some of the other work that you're doing.
Yeah, I am doing some really exciting stuff, and like you said, like it's stuff that's in the works. So
Mm-hmm.
I can only say so much, but I could tease you with the fact that AI is the big buzzword of things
Mm-hmm.
there. Super excited about it because think of it as for folks who will be curious as to like what this whole AI thing is. We kind of touched on it on like that statistic that we talked about. Why are so little people using Chat GPT? Well, maybe
Mm-hmm.
because they don't understand like what is it? What is Chat GPT? What is it good for? Like, why do I even need to use that? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Where does AI fit into the whole spectrum of things? What is it? Right? Where do I
Mm-hmm.
fit it into a business or my business? How can it make me my day better? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So just kind of, I guess that is to say, orienting you in some contextual understanding about where to put AI in our world today, why it's something that it's a buzzword, and it's a thing that you should think about because right now you are guaranteed affected by it in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
and so I'm really excited to touch on those components. And again, in what I hold near and dear is in a nice, simple, friendly,
Mm-hmm.
uncomplicated way, um, and just kind
And
of
that's
really
so
getting
important.
people comfortable with
Yeah.
it, right? Yeah,
I I think that the people that have heard about, so even though 43% or so people haven't heard about it, of the people that have heard about it but haven't used it, I think that people really need that kind of context. Like the things that we talked about today, the ability to look at all that dark data that perhaps you haven't been looking at and getting some new insights, and seeing how it can, have a positive impact and helping you do your job faster, better, more
Right.
efficiently. I think those are fantastic things. But you also have this thing called Walter Shields Data Academy. So can you talk a little bit about what that is and what you're doing over there?
Absolutely. So Walter Shields Data Academy is where we have a platform that offers folks training in data analytics and data science.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that through a number of different mediums, but three main mediums, and that is through our books. So we have a best-selling book and other recommended books that we use to uh, help folks really grasp and understand not just SQL, but data analytics as a whole. We
Mm-hmm.
have obviously what we're talking about on now, the LinkedIn Learning platform. Some
Mm-hmm.
amazing courses, like you said, it's yeah, SQL Essentials, um, data analysis with SQL, and on the platform as well, not just my courses, I have highlighted a number of
Mm-hmm.
other data centric courses that I think is going to benefit anyone who's just trying to understand the world of data and analytics and data science. One of the main components, the third and main component, is that live cohort class. So we
Mm-hmm.
are really zeroing in on the value of teaching folks who are just really learn better with a live component. So it'll be me actually teaching a live class, and I teach you not just SQL, but data analytics, AI, and really in a friendly, interactive
Mm-hmm.
place. One of the key components of data analytics that I bake into every lesson is the backdrop of learning about the life cycle of artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you're learning about SQL, you will learn about how SQL applies to the process of an artificial intelligence project. So that is something that we are really proud, and I'm really proud to showcase that live cohort-based class. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, a place to
Super
find
cool.
me, a place to get a
Yeah,
hold of
definitely go check out
WSDA
this
news.
WSDA news. A lot of the articles that we talked about, I found right here, or you can subscribe. I think to you have a LinkedIn newsletter that you were starting as well. So
LinkedIn
this is like
newsletter.
a lot of gold in here. Really good stuff, especially for probably
Yeah,
even more gold for like data analysts. I looked at this article on the Hollywood fear of generative AI. I think that
yeah.
the Fabric. I think I'm really interested in what this tool is going to do for people as well, and a lot of fantastic content in here. And then you have this thing where you can actually play with a sequel game, and
Yeah,
then there's also like a sequel
absolutely.
dojo. So
So SQL Dojo here, for instance, is something I'm really happy about. So you could, if you didn't,
yep,
folks who
I
often
think I
have
clicked on
issue
something.
with, I think that just opened your to
Oh yeah,
expected a
yeah. I
pause.
was
So you
gonna
could
load
actually
some
load.
local data. That's cool.
Yeah, so you could actually load a
Yeah.
SQLite database in there. It'll load up and you
Hmm.
can start writing SQL against it, right? So it's like an in-browser SQL experience where you don't need to install anything. You could just start practicing, and that was the whole idea. So you could grab
Super.
my book, for instance, and just go over
Yeah.
here and start, sharpening up your skills on SQL. So
Super.
that's
So
a lot
yeah,
of cool stuff. So I'd encourage anyone to stop on by. Yes, indeed, subscribe to the newsletter. You can get a hold of
Walter.
me. So,
Yeah, you're amazing, man. When do you have the time for all this? People will always say. So you're a busy man. That's great. I'm glad. Listen, thank you so much for coming to the show. I really do appreciate it. I wanted to
Thank you for
mention a
having
couple of
me.
ways. Yeah, absolutely, man. My pleasure. What a great conversation. I always love the pre-show. I always learn a little bit more. Unfortunately, not everybody can be there for that, but we had some conversations. It's a bunch of different places where you can get more information about this and other future shows. We have a LinkedIn page where you can get all the data. We have the LinkedIn, the newsletter version of the show. So you'll get all the links to everything that we talked about. Plus, you'll get show notes. So basically, I take what happened in the show today and I write an article about it. And then we have like links to the key points that we covered, any links that we talked about, and perhaps a few more will be in there as well. There's also a list of all the episodes. So if you want to see, I talked about Donnie Ma coming into the next show, and you want to see any of the previous guests that I have. I had Nick Singh last week talking about getting a career in data. And we talked to, I mentioned Sadie St. Lawrence, Christina Statopoulos, lots of really amazing people. And you can check their episodes on that guide. There's also a YouTube playlist if you're into YouTube. And I also launched an audio podcast version of this. The interesting thing about that is that I do go through and I edit it down. So usually this show is about an hour, and that audio podcast will probably be like between 30 and 40 minutes. So it's just like the focus stuff. It's just designed for people that are just maybe driving or, taking a long walk every day, to have an opportunity to listen to the show. But if you want to keep up with everything, the best way is the newsletter. You will get an email each week with the latest show, all the show notes, and everything else. So as I mentioned before, next week I'm taking a break during the July 4th week. So everybody enjoy
Yeah. Happy
that
July
time.
4th.
Yes. And then when I get back, we're going to be talking to Jack Ma about the future of advertising and media. He's a principal engineer at Lumos, so he's involved with how all the stuff that we're doing, affects radio, TV, news. So I'm super excited because that's where I came from. Super excited to talk to him in a couple of weeks, actually, on episode 25. Once again, Walter, thank you so much. And I know we'll keep in touch, and maybe
Thank you
we'll
so
have you
much,
back
Ray.
again some other time. Well, take care. I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.
Bye.